guys looking for? What do you expect kids to know when they apply for school? What if they want a scholarship? What level should they be at if they're thinking about any kind of scholarship? I know Chip has grad program. You have grad programs too, right, Ken?
We have a master's degree in jazz studies.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe even for some of those kids, what you might be looking for on a master's level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let me
Hey,
pull
Jim,
something this up.
what's happening, man?
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Not bad.
Harold, we talked about your first day on Woody's band with Harold this morning.
My roommate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
Well, hey, Glenn, I mean, just in general, like for kids for later, if they check this out, I mean, I guess things that I am looking for is the biggest thing, I suppose, even with the grad students, is just, jazz concept. Having some idea of a concept, coming in, particularly the undergrad kids out of high school, have they checked out some of the history of the music? Have they checked out, obviously maybe at least players on their own instrument and are familiar with like different roles of what their instrument might do in a large ensemble setting of various types or small group settings of various types. So I mean, if I had to just sum it up in one word, that's what I am looking for
Well,
mostly.
how do you find out if they know that before when they
Well,
apply?
have them play, obviously,
So you
play or
have to,
sing, whatever they're, I mean, you can tell right away. It's like, it's going to come through in their sound development at that stage, whatever it is. Like if it's an undergrad, it's going to come through in their technique. It's going to come through in their articulation, probably even more important, when you get into swing and stuff. Just any music anyway. Articulation is really what kind of distinguishes what's going to make them feel like something when they play or sing. I think it's even more important with the vocal people. I used to do a lot of vocal stuff, and most of the young vocal people coming in have no concept of articulation whatsoever. They just don't understand it. It's like a classical violin player or something coming in. Their articulation background singing is completely different than what a jazz background might be in terms of just different types of shorter articulations and stuff. They just don't have a concept of that. So that's what I'm primarily looking for. Then, yeah, you break it down into, do they have harmonic knowledge? Do they have a knowledge of how to phrase a melody? Phrasing would be another one high up on the list. For me, it's a subcategory of concept, but it's a big one. Do they have a concept of melodic phrasing? Can they take just a ballad? One of the first things I do with auditions is just have them play the melody to something, and just how they phrase the melody. And then maybe I'll ask them to phrase it, as if they were playing it a straight eighth, or if they were playing in swing, or if they're playing it in a Latin style, or whatever, and just see what they do, because that's going to tell me about all the articulation techniques, how they might alter their sound, all that stuff, comes into play. Then it's all kind of broken down from there. Now, obviously, with grad students, you're looking for further down the line concepts. Have they really checked out, the main figures on their instrument? Have they done a fair amount of transcribing? Even at high school level now, most of them are doing some transcribing, thank God. And, just listening. What do they have knowledge of? And then I'll kind of check out, tune knowledge. Do they have repertoire? I mean, because let's face it, it's still a repertoire based industry, good or bad. That's just the way it's developed. And so if they don't have a knowledge of some repertoire, you and I know, Glenn and Jim, just the three of us from having been on gigs with so many of our students, that you get on a gig and the first thing that comes out is the I real B or whatever it is, now in the books. And I had a student years ago. Well, Glenn, you probably remember him, Sean Parsons. Remember the piano
yeah,
player?
yeah.
Yeah, and Sean, and so I always make a point to try to play with students a lot. We all do, and these are grad students. So we were out on a gig once, and of course back then it was before the phones and they had the apps, but he'd bring his laptop. It was kind of the beginning of that, and of course it would be some standard, and okay, you can read it once. We play the melody. I'll play the melody, blah blah blah, and then I just walk over. The minute he'd start to sell, I just walk over and close the laptop. And like, okay, if you don't have it down by now, that's welcome to the world. You're not going to make it. You got to have that ability to analyze something quickly and at least be able to know what the changes are, get the form, some basic things about that. So when kids come in as grad students to audition, I'm also looking for that kind of stuff. I'll usually ask them to, obviously we have prepared stuff and, stuff we put on the site, list them, give them some tunes, but then I'll say, hey, play something that's in this style or something, that's not on this list, just something. I want to hear you do it.
What about reading?
Well, reading was a big thing with me too. Obviously with COVID, we haven't been able to do much of that, but that's a big thing I think is a lost art these days. It's getting more and more lost as we go through the years, unfortunately, because high school band directors and junior high, when the kids start, they're not making them read every day.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember years ago in jazz education, even when I was a kid, I didn't come from a place that had a jazz band. I just learned from my dad. We'd sit and he'd made me read every day. We'd sit and read things, hour after hour. And and I saw it just decline and decline and decline where they're not getting that. The essentially Ellington and all that stuff. I mean, yeah, God bless them. That's great. It's great to check out that music, but they spend like a whole year, in these high school programs, and they work on the same 3 goddamn tunes, so they can copy solos of guys that have been dead for 50 years, and that's all they can do. I mean, I'm all for transcribing and checking them out to get concepts out of them, but not to go out and regurgitate the shit. If Duke Ellington was standing there, I think he'd throw up. He don't want to hear that. He wants to hear something that they play. And that's what I try to tell these kids. Use it to help your knowledge, but not be the only base of your knowledge. You've got to go further than that. And reading different things every day. I mean, like Rory, I know, has some wonderful, rhythmic stuff, and just, kids can't even decipher rhythms anymore, much less, melodic sequences and linear sequences on top of rhythmic sequences. And so reading, I think, is real important. And I didn't do it this year with auditions because of the COVID business. It's hard to do this way, but when I'm back in person, that's one of the big things I make them do. And all my applied students, grad or undergrad, the first of an hour lesson, I do 20 minutes of each lesson where we do nothing but read together. We just try to read something new, and I play it with them, and sometimes I'll pick tempos that really push them, and if they struggle, they struggle. And I say, well, that's why you go home and you do this every day, and you won't stop struggling. At a point, you'll start to recognize at least rhythms, because the rhythms are a lot of and especially with the younger students coming out of high school, they just haven't got a concept for seeing like even typical rhythms, much less anything kind of
Well, they haven't played enough music yet. Like you said,
Yeah,
they only
yeah.
do 3 or 4 tunes for a whole jazz band.
Yeah, they don't make them read every day. I mean, they used to make them read. I mean, I guess that was one of the things, I went to North Texas years ago when Leon Breeden and some of those guys were there, and, that was the whole idea of the whole place, was you read shit all the time. Not only stuff that was written by just composers that were out there, but stuff that was being written by your peers, by the students. And some of the stuff was the hardest stuff. It was usually, it wasn't crafted quite as well, and you had to really be on your toes to read it to try to make it sound like music, and that was part of I think that was a really good thing about those lab bands. They were called laboratory bands because that's what we did. We did that stuff every day. And now it just doesn't happen. So I mean, I try to do it with my big band, as you guys know. I mean, that's why we rehearse 5 days a week. Half of it is just to get them to read new stuff, because that's where they fold the hardest. And not only just reading the notes, but like changes and stuff. And getting a concept for a new tune. What kind of a space. I remember pulling out some like Maria Schneider charts and stuff, and I went to school with Maria, and I know how she wrote, and I'd pull out some of that stuff just to say, okay, let's just read this. And then when we get to the solo sections, just to see how the kids would react to those spaces. What do they do? How do they create different spaces in those with the rhythm section? Even though they're reading, okay, now go beyond that and turn it into music. Step off of the page. You have to understand what's on the page, but then step off of the page and make some music out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a big one. Like I said, concept would probably be the one word I'd look for the most.
Yeah. Kent, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with, just everything that Chip says. I do, we have the stuff on the website too. I just pulled it up just as a reference. And I'm sure that it's similar to things that, everybody here does, but, in case there are students wondering, we have a Bachelor of Music in Performance Jazz and Bachelor in Music Education with an instrumental jazz emphasis. And I didn't used to do it this way, but I do it this way now because I find out a lot of things in a very quick period of time. You know, play blues for me. Um, Pick a standard. I'm not going to tell you which one to pick, but that'll tell me if you know what I'm talking about. You know, find a standard that jazz musicians play and play it. And then prepare a jazz tune of your own choosing. And students that actually care about doing this, you know, sometimes they'll get in contact with me and say, oh, is this one okay? Or is that one okay? Or else they go to their teachers, band directors, whatever, and get some advice about how to do that. This is this year's, obviously, schedule an audition on Zoom. Candidates playing an audition for jazz scholarship, but not degree admission. If you're doing, you know, like say somebody's going to be a strict performance major, or they're going to be a music education major, but not do the degree, I just have them prepare a blues selection. Basically, that's what we do. The master's degree, of course, is a little bit different, obviously. An audition with stuff that they would pick on a CD or DVD or a link. I want to hear them play. Like Chip says, I want to hear how they play. Also, we're doing a submission of an original composition and or arrangement for a typical jazz group, score and parts, as well as a recording. And at the graduate level, I ask for a sample of academic writing from undergraduate school. Because it is graduate school, and if you can't write a paper, you're really not going to get through. In our version of it, you know, the classes are kind of academic.
Kind
in
of
certain
academic.
ways. Kind of academic. You like that? Okay.
I like that.
Anyway, no, but if you're taking jazz theory and you have to write a paper at the end of the semester, you're taking jazz history, or if you're taking jazz composition, or if you're taking the research bibliography class, I mean, all of those classes are going to have a project that entails some kind of academic writing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in addition to all the applied things you do in lessons, in composition, and in your performing. So it's a slightly different kind of degree than, you know, but it's the kind of degree we feel like we can do very well with our faculty and the facilities that we have.
Yeah.
The other things that, you know, Chip mentions, like and I kind of put them into a category of instrumental proficiency. And obviously those things would be at different levels for an undergraduate audition than it would be for a graduate audition. But man, do you play in tune on your instrument? Do you get a sound that's beautiful and idiomatic? Can you play in all keys? Do you play in time? Can you actually play in time? All these kinds of things. When you articulate, is it the kind of articulation that I would expect from someone that is playing and has listened well in the jazz idiom? The other thing that I like to do, and this is like a pet peeve of mine, and I don't know if other people do it, but I always do it. I sit at the piano and I say, okay, here's what I want you to do. I'm gonna play a note. You have to turn around. You're not allowed to look. And I just pick out notes in the range of their particular instrument. And I say, sing that note. And I have them do it. And if they can't match a pitch on the piano, I think we have an issue. The other thing I do is I play pitches on the piano, and I say, play that pitch on your instrument, not an octave higher. Play the note that I play, not an octave lower. Play the exact pitch that I play, because I need to find out what their recognition orally is like. That tells me a lot. And then I do, you know, depending on the student, you know, I'll start with triads and doing qualities. If they're sailing through that, and then I go to seventh chords, I go to, some scale choices. Do you know what this is? Do you know what that is? Because I want to know, even if they don't know the exact name of it, I want to know if they recognize that sound. Because for me, the ear is really at the center of everything we do. And I'm sure nobody's going to argue with me about that point.
No, it's not in the center, it's on either side.
Yeah, well, yeah, but if your brain's in the center of it and it's all wired up together.
That's assuming you still have a brain left.
Well,
Since Jim is on here, I wonder if you'd like to contribute to this discussion. You don't have to, it's not your time, but I'd love to hear from you. Jim Pugh.
Oh. You're muted, Jim.
You're muted.
I'm
There
trying
you
to mute.
There we go.
I'm just going to listen for the time being because I'm sort of thinking about
Yeah.
what, considering the population here, it's like it's like what I had sort of planned is going to be like just hashing over like baby food. Considering we're sitting in this august company here.
Well, no, we're recording this for future reference, so kids can ask me. I'm a trombone player and a junior in high school, and I want to maybe go to U of I after a year. What do I need to work on in my senior year for you?
Oh boy. Yeah, I was just going over that actually with an auditionee this morning.
Yeah.
Because we've been, and Chip will attest to this, we've been sort of in this situation where we're getting a lot of pressure to put butts in seats for monetary reasons, which sort of puts like another interesting twist on it. It's sort of going back and forth with that with people that maybe from, well, like Kent was saying, maybe this might not be the smartest thing for them to be doing, but where there's pressure from up above saying we need to have them there anyway. So that gets into like a strange thing, but we're, everything perfect. I think all the stuff, both Chip and Ken were talking about is vitally important. Depending upon whether it's graduate or undergraduate, I want to see certainly the competency on the instrument. The one thing where in some ways it's even trickier on, and I expect string instruments are going to have the same issue, that being as which trombone is like this sort of, there's infinite choices as to where things, it's like sometimes the ear development can play an even greater role in that you don't have this mechanism that creates fixed lengths of tubing in an instrument, that you have to judge so much from your ear. So that becomes, I think, really of primary importance, just for my particular instrument. It's particularly undergrad, because we're also in a funny thing. I don't know if this happens in Youngstown, but a lot, pretty much at the undergraduate level, students have not necessarily decided that jazz or commercial or that kind of playing is the direction they want to go, and they just put down generically trombone. It's in that case, they don't come to our neck of the woods. They go automatically to the classical thing. So it's always tricky finding like the younger players that have already committed to jazz as their sort of music of choice or style of choice. A lot of times they just haven't been exposed to enough yet. So that's tricky. I do get, actually this year had a couple undergrad students who just knocked my socks off. But they were coming through. They were playing, like one of them is up around Chicago. Has been studying with why am I blanking on his name? Tom Garling, And those from Michigan has been studying with Michael Deese. So it's like, so they've got, taking like private lessons with him. So it's like you've got some people with some really strong backgrounds. That's actually at the undergraduate level, I find that that's very unusual. Not so much a graduate. Graduate, they've committed to a style, and and then there's so a lot of times actually for undergraduates, I don't necessarily need to see a whole lot of jazz proficiency or even jazz knowledge at that point, but they have a desire to be doing that, and a sense that they're going to work, and that they have say a requisite competency on their instrument. I think it's fine for me anyway.
Now Rory's at the new school, or was until recently, right? And so that's a whole different set of kids that are coming there to study jazz at the new school. They want to be stars, right?
Well, a lot of people, but there's sort of a big question. Well, I guess two things is striking. One is, I don't know if students are going to really watch this thing, but there's a part of it that I feel like maybe it'd be useful for them to also have the flip side. What should you look for in a program that you go to? Might be interesting to talk about. But since we got all the people on the faculty side on the call, I'm wondering what you all notice. See, my girlfriend's a political science professor at another university, and between the two of us and friends that we know, we've seen so many cases of what I'm about to mention that we're suspecting that this is a trend. But I'm curious for you guys, because maybe you don't experience it at all. She, being a political science, describes this as the neoliberalization of higher education. So what that means is,
Yep.
So our school, or you're recording this, I should mince my words, but I won't do it too much.
I can stop it.
No, okay, I'll talk. We're talking about like very upper administration people making astounding amounts of money, completely disproportionate to anything that they're doing. They're not bringing in, they're not good at fundraising, so huge. And then a quickly expanding collection of these odd administrative people. Like we've got, what's her name? What's her title? Assistant so-and-so, vice blah, blah, blah of teaching and learning. This is like a pretty highly paid individual who somehow has something to do with our department. What is she doesn't know anything about the music. She went to a program, I think she studied theoretical pedagogy. Okay, maybe there's a room for that. So then I've asked all my fellow professors, I won't mention her name, has so-and-so, has she ever done anything that was useful for you? And everyone looks at me like, no, I don't know what she does. She just seems to be reading. She doesn't do anything. So I've never run into a student who's gotten any benefit from her, and I've never run into a teacher who's gotten any benefit from her. So an economist at our university, because New School has the veneer of being like this really progressive, on the front lines of things place. So it's interesting that in our own school, an economist professor did this study of what's happening at the school, and he presented this blistering thing where he was showing the administrative bloat that the number of people in the
Right on.
and
Yeah.
making it is skyrocketing. The number of professors on their average income is decreasing,
Right.
and then meanwhile, this is just about my school, then you have these people that get in place, kind of not very competent administrators, whose the only project I can see that they have in life, their criteria for success is their own personal advancement. So if they can get 300 more students, even if these, so I'm going to try on the jazz program, 300 more students, people that don't know how to write a quarter note, have never played with anyone, that maybe someone's, they said, well, they sang in the shower, they don't really know any tunes, but they sound nice, and they won't get scholarships. They'll pay full tuition because their parents are rich and they don't know what to do at school. Boom, let's take them. If we can get another 300 students, we're going to make so much more money. And I'm looking at this people, I'm thinking like, you'd be fine as a manager in a factory making underwear. And you want to make underwear for as little cost as possible and sell as many pieces of underwear. But I don't think that's what education is. I'm not even limiting that to jazz. If Caltech suddenly decided that they should bring in a huge basket weaving program to add to their aerospace, design, it's like it doesn't make sense. It's not just trying to make the most possible money. So anyway, it's just funny because I've seen, and I could go on, but this is, you get the idea. I've seen this at my school, which is, I mean, it's appalling what's happening. And by the way, they're still mouthing all of the things from the 100-year history of the school about, progressive and all this stuff. And, Black Lives Matter. Wow, the administrators will say great things about, BIPOC, and we got to, but meanwhile, my colleague, one of the best teachers in the department, African-American gentleman, older guy, full professor, he's won the teaching recognition award. They didn't renew his contract. Let me be blunt. Our Dean's Committee, who makes all these decisions, there's not a single non-white person on the whole committee. And there's not a single person who really knows about the music. So it's just astounding. Well, of course, my girlfriend in a different university, in a different field, has the same thing. She's got someone who's making, I can't remember how many, like $1 million, and I don't remember the exact amount that the president's making every year, making completely knucklehead decisions one after the other. Anyway, it's enough of me talking about that, but do you all find that this is like a widespread thing in USA, in administrations?
This is totally widespread.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's everywhere yet, but I mean, I know it's hit us extremely hard. They've changed, our hiring and ranks now to, it used to be instructor, assistant, professor, associate, and full professor, and those were all tenure track positions. Now, when a position's vacated, you're not even guaranteed you'll get it back. Chip knows my story. I'll tell your story at the same time. You're not guaranteed you're going to get it back. You might get it back as part-time, or you might get the tenure track position. They said, no, we're not going to give you a tenure track, but we'll give you a lecturer, and you have to give them 15 hours of things to teach. And what they've done over a period of time is to shrink the faculty. And there's a huge attrition problem that we have now, to say nothing. And you said it, Rory, so I'll back it up, to say nothing of the fact that they talk a good talk about diversity, but there isn't any. At least not on the faculty. And, I could go on and on about it, but it's going on, and it's really, at times, it's oppressive and it's depressing. And to me, it doesn't have anything to do with education. And all of these degrees, they keep wanting to know, well, how are you assessing this? And how are you assessing that? And you need to turn in an assessment report. And you need to do this, and you need to do that. And I'm like, well, when am I supposed to see my students? You got me running around doing so much paperwork that I can't get anything done. And it's not only that, whatever fundraising there is going into degree types that they figured out in their particular political party is something that is beneficial to the business world. So we now do things that are like job training. Well, what job can you get with this degree? You know what? What job can you get with almost any music degree? Or, because they want to know, where are your students employed? Well, he's a freelance trombonist composer in New York City. What else do you need to know? But that doesn't make it with them. So, those pressures to put, as Chip said, or Jim said, put butts in the seats. Yeah, that's it. And they're going, you guys need to go out and get more students. Well, first of all, the whole society has changed, and the number of people going into music degrees is fewer than it's ever been for a long time. And the demographic of people who are 18 years old in our state is very low. We're almost to the bottom of it. They say it's not going to turn around until 2026 in the state of Ohio. It's going to
That's
continue
nationwide,
to
I
dwindle.
think. And I think that's nationwide.
Okay. Yeah. And so we'll get more students. Well, then what does that mean? Take students who don't belong in the school and just, I don't know, Rory, that's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo Rory a lot of it, and Ken, you mentioned it. It's the business model. This
Yes.
happened about 20 years ago, quite frankly. The business of they decided to run, and it started with major schools like mine, Big Ten schools that are gigantic, and then it spread to the little more boutique type special schools, New School and places in New York too. But it's just the business, we'll hire successful business people and put them in the administration to run things, because the old model of having the presidents and the provosts and those people that handle the money decisions and the decisions about that used to come from the faculty. They used to be the full professors that moved on and knew had some institutional memory. Now that's all gone. That's basically, it's gone 180 degrees the other way. And this, I want to bring it back to the students that are looking. You should be very, very careful wherever you're looking to go to school and investigate that. Like states like ours, we call those people, Rory, you were talking about the people making millions at the expense of your students and getting good students and being able to offer scholarships to the talented students, retaining the faculty that actually know about, in your field, music, our field, Well, because that money goes to football coaches and athletic directors and overpaid, like you say, people that you don't even know what they do, assistant to the assistant to the assistant dean, who, like Kent said, want us to do reports instead of actually teach anybody how to actually do this music. And so students, you and parents, I would speak more even to the parents. I tell them this flat out. You should be raising holy hell, and especially in my situation with our school, because it's a public university. And that we're not serving you, the public, anymore is at the expense of these status moving, upwardly mobile business people that are the administrators, is a travesty. We have a whole board of trustees in Chicago that's supposed to be, minding the university. They get paid $1 million a piece to make the decisions to hire football coaches that do nothing for us, teach in no degree programs. For me, a public university shouldn't be paying more than a couple $100,000 to anybody other than maybe a distinguished faculty, maybe that's really done a lot in their field, but nothing to people that don't teach in degree programs. Zero. When I came here, there was no degrees in jazz at U of I. I started all three of them at the same time. The undergraduate, the master's, and the DMA, and built it. And I taught everything myself for the first 4 or 5 years. I built it up from scratch. And I'm not just tooting my horn, but I'm very proud of the fact that, Kent, you were mentioning now, when you lose faculty members or people retire or whatever, you're not guaranteed of getting anybody back. Most of the time they're not. And they're doing the same thing here. They're just going to replace them with an adjunct at best. And it's not even an adjunct that has necessarily any skill in the area. It's just somebody that's cheap that they could get. And I'm super proud, and it'll only last for a while because we're getting to the age where someday we're going to be gone too, of our faculty. That's why I was so glad to get Jim. All of our guys are full-time tenure track faculty, all the jazz faculty here. And I insisted upon it. I just said, I'll quit tomorrow. I won't be here if you don't do that. I won't even be a part of that. And so by the time I've been at this for 30 years too, so 20 of it here, and one of these days when I'm gone. But students, you should, and your parents should be demanding that. Is this a real full-time jazz faculty with people that know this music and know what they're doing and place people in real jobs and have students that have gone out and had success in the real world of music, or not? And that's a really important question to be asking. And you're right, Rory. It's the kids, the students that are coming in should be asking us those questions. And I get some that do.